Welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast, a podcast for everyone with an entrepreneurial spirit. Every week, I am joined by successful guests in all different industries and stages of business who will share what their experience was like transitioning from employee to boss. Expect action steps, inspiration, and hot topics. This is a resource for you if you're wanting to start a business, go all in on your side hustle, get to the next level in your thriving business, or just hear what it's like taking the leap to becoming your own boss. Business can be very lonely, but it does not have to be. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast production agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. Let's dive into today's topic. Happy fall! I hope that you are all having a great start to the Q4 season, the fall season, and really still focusing on your business because there's still 3 months left and a lot can happen for you and your business as a whole in 3 months. So don't lose vision just yet. Keep going until the end of the year and you will see those results come to life. This is something that I've been talking a lot about with my clients and just with people on Instagram about if they want to start a podcast or a new business venture or whatever it is. Like, don't discount the last 3 months of the year. There's a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can achieve and a lot of success that you can have this time of year. So with that being said, I have a great episode for you today with a special guest, Rachel Morgan. She is a retail sales coach and trainer and is passionate about helping retail businesses thrive and achieve their full potential through effective sales strategies and customer engagement. With 13 plus years of experience in luxury retail, she now works with businesses to hear less "I'm just looking" and feel confident to engage without feeling pushy and effective follow-up. She specializes in turning underperforming stores around and increasing their customer lifetime value. This episode is great if you want to start an in-person business, and also you'll learn a lot of sales strategy tips in this episode, even if you have an online business. I've learned a lot from Rachel, and I cannot wait for you to learn from her as well. All of our links are in the show notes, and if you have any questions, definitely connect with me or Rachel. We're both more than happy to speak with you. All right, enjoy. Hey, Rachel, thank you so much for joining me on the Employee to Boss podcast. I am so excited to be talking with you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled. Thank you.
Yeah. So we met at a networking event, the Founders Table here in Seattle, and we were sitting right next to each other at this dinner party, and we just had the greatest conversation. You work in sales, but a little bit different than a lot of the people that are in sales that I've talked to on this podcast. So I'm excited to hear your new perspectives to the age-old sales process. So if you wanted to start by telling me more about who you are, I would love to learn.
Yeah. It's amazing what can happen, right, from a networking event. You never know who you're going to meet and where it's going to lead to, right? So, I am a sales trainer for retail businesses. And the way I got into this was I personally worked in retail for over 13 years and in different positions from store management to associate and training as well. And just really fell in love with training people and turning around underperforming stores. And so I left my role and started my own business a few years ago to teach other businesses how to get their customer lifetime value up and their retention through how they engage with customers, how they upsell, cross sell, follow up, and teach them just how to have stronger relationships with their customers.
That's awesome. I am really excited to dive into this because when we are online and we have, a lot of customers might come to us once. And for my clients, I work with them for a long time. And sometimes they'll give me referrals, and that's all amazing. But I'm not selling a product, I'm selling a service. And so before we get into this, what type of stores are you typically working with?
So we do typically work with brick and mortar
Mhm.
retail. However, oftentimes services are our products. So it's just
Mm.
kind of shifting our perspective on how we see what we sell. So if you have something to sell, I consider that still a product in many ways.
Very cool. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. And for anyone who's listening who's like, "Oh, well, I don't sell a product or a service," like Any sales advice I think is so valuable. So stick around for this conversation because I know you'll get a lot out of this. So, Rachel, why don't you start off by telling us about what your journey from employee to boss looked like?
Yeah. So, gosh, so like I had said before, I worked in the fine jewelry industry for nearly a decade and worked my way up into store management. And I oversaw a couple of stores.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
quite
And
a
I feel like when you're selling jewelry, it luxury? Like what was it high ticket? Like what was that all like?
Yeah, so I was working for so fine jewelry would be a little bit of a higher ticket item.
Hmm.
And so you will typically see people for specific occasions, right? Like birthday or holiday. So really the
Mm,
key is how do you get people to keep coming back in between or even come back at all, right?
yeah.
And so I really fell in love with sales and making it not feel so sleazy and gross and pushy and showing people that it can just really be a lot of fun and be very rewarding.
Hmm.
And so that was really what led me to want to do this. And I also just got so tired of seeing bad customer service. And so I wanted to work with people one on one and show them these little tweaks that we can make can really make a huge difference.
Yes. I mean, I think we can all think of a moment when we were in a store shopping and the salesperson was just kind of like harassing us and we were like, "Oh my
Mhm.
God, please walk away from me." Oh, and then there's also those times where they're so helpful
Mhm.
and actually you want to buy from them. And I think that this can translate really easily to online sales as well. I mean, not to come for the MLM girls, but some of them have been in my DMs harassing me. So, there's
Yes.
different sales
Yeah.
tactics that we're going to get into. But what was the moment where you're like, okay, I want to go into the coaching side of sales?
Yeah. And I will also say too, just, we often equate sales as being overly pushy, but sometimes we actually come across as not having service when we don't engage at all, right? So we've
Hmm.
all gone into a store where no one is helping us or no one seems to care to, or they're in a circle talking to each other, right? And even on the online space, right? Maybe we're not talking to our community or our followers or acknowledging their presence. So sales can go on both sides of that, absolutely. So when I left the fine jewelry world, I completely left. I did not sell at all. And so I just started my business because I knew. So part of when I was a manager is we first of all didn't have an onboarding process. And so
Mm.
it came down to us as the manager how we wanted to train our team, which meant I was very forced to consider what it looked like to train my team to be consistent and also have expectations. And I had a team of 16 people, which meant it was very important that there is consistency because you want everyone on your team to know like what they should be doing, and that's how you're going to create like a cohesive culture. And so I was doing some workshops at our corporate on how to onboard, and then we had phenomenal training actually, but I always wanted to take a step further. So I found myself designing my own training, and it was often shared with others within our company. And so this led me to really realize that I enjoyed training people and walking them through the process and then coaching them on how to get better. So we hear coaching, but there's so many elements to it, whether it's consulting and also training and also some coaching. It's a mix of it, right? Because you've got to be able to identify what the issue is, which is to me the consulting and the strategy planning. And then you have to coach through it to get to where you're going. But usually through the coaching, there's a training piece too. So, anyways, that was a lot of words. And so I knew in my heart that's what I needed to do. And so, unfortunately, my company at the time was not looking to have a sales trainer. So I decided to pave that way for myself and train. And so it is a very unique and kind of different thing in the online space. There's a lot of coaching, but not necessarily a lot of training or consulting around it. And so I wouldn't really say like there was a moment. It was a little bit before COVID, but I was getting to this point where I knew that I needed a little bit of growth and I was ready to take on something new and to lean more in my skills and develop them more. And so that is what really led me to take that leap.
Very cool. I love that. And I used to work for a sales enablement company here in Seattle running their podcast, and that's the first time I ever heard that there was a difference between coaching and training. Before that, I thought that they'd be the exact same thing, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners think that they're the same thing too. I think that those words can be interchangeable, but there is a difference. So, can you tell us what the difference is?
Oh gosh, I love this question. I think that they do overlap in a lot of ways, right? So to me, training is training material. So it's more exercise, activities, implementation. Coaching is more kind of asking the right questions to get people and directing them where they want to go, and then helping them kind of get to the end. But ultimately, to me, it comes to the person that you're coaching to kind of get to that answer. I think training is a little bit more straightforward, like this is the answer, but there's not necessarily an element of like, I'm going to coach you through that as well. So
Mm,
when you have them together, I think it just is magical, right? Because you're helping people think about it a little bit more than just reading about it or watching it.
yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure if anyone here is listening and has a team or has been on a team before, and the leadership is like, this is the way to do it this way. And they're not doing anything else to kind of get you to that point. And maybe they're feeling frustrated. Maybe you're feeling frustrated. I'm sure it's because one of these elements is missing in the exercises that you are, trying to get through.
Oh, you nailed it. I love it, Haley. Yes. So one thing I really learned having my own team was it just really was not enough to put them in front of a screen and say, go do this training on this product or go do this training about how to engage a customer. It really took that extra step of coaching where it's like, okay, now let's practice. Let's role
Mhm.
play it. Let's talk through this. What feels hard for you? Why does it feel hard for you? Like, how can I better support you? And really helping them now see the bigger picture and add some perspective to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when, you're thinking about sales as any stage of business, a lot of these listeners are newer in business, but there's of course some listeners who want to level up in their business. And I think a lot of the times we can get so in our head about being too salesy. And exactly like you just said, follow-ups are so important. I don't think I would have made a single purchase in my whole life online or, whatever if I didn't have a follow-up attached to it. I'm just one of those buyers. And, if you're listening, there's tons of information on different buyer types that we won't get into today, but I mean, it's so important to know what type of buyer type you are, what type of buyer type you have. But feeling salesy is a common feeling, especially for women in business. What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, you said so many fabulous things. So I would love to circle back at some point about follow up because I know
Yeah.
that's one area that we're all like, how do I do it? What do I say? How do I do it without being annoying? So, first of all, and I think that we feel salesy because we are afraid to sell. But I want to kind of position it in this way. Not selling is a disservice. Not It's a disservice to what you sell because it means you're not giving an opportunity to make a difference for someone. It's a disservice to your business because I know that you're pouring yourself into it, right? And you care about it. It's why you created it. So by not talking about what you do, you're not giving your business the opportunity to shine as well. But then you're also disservicing a customer because you're not providing that solution that they might need to make their life better, right? You created something in order to do that. And as long as you believe in what you do, then you should want to tell everyone about it, right? And really the key to not feeling salesy is building a connection with someone. So the more that you focus on building a connection, the easier it's going to be to talk about what you do and connect the dots on why it's the solution. So don't ever be afraid to talk about what you do. Be excited about it. Be passionate about it, right? Energy is really infectious. But I will also say this oftentimes that when we do feel salesy, it's because like we're not selling at all. So when we actually try and sell, we're less salesy because I find that when we feel salesy, we tend to withdraw more and we tend to kind of come across unintentionally more cold and transactional because we're waiting for someone to come to us to tell us what they need. So and like in person, right? That would look like not talking to a customer. So someone walks in and we don't acknowledge them, right? At all, ever. We stand behind the counter. Maybe we're talking to our coworker. We're waiting for the customer to be ready to buy. And then we're simply there to kind of ring them up. Maybe we remind them, is there anything else that you wanted? Or did you find everything today? And that's kind of it because we're afraid to engage, right? And then on the online space, it might look like not talking to anybody in your community, not replying to comments. Maybe you're just posting, but you're not even leaving comments on others in your feed. Maybe you're not acknowledging your followers. So it really like being salesy almost is more like not engaging with people. Does
Mm,
that make sense?
absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Like, you're not going to grow your business or grow your services or just grow your community if you never talk to your community. And, a while ago, I made a post on Instagram about how I was listening to a podcast, and I swear every 10 minutes she did a commercial break to talk about her services, her program. And that was a little bit of an overkill. That was a lot. That was definitely a lot. And so I made a social media post about it, and someone challenged me on it and was like, well, if you know that your service is helping someone, then wouldn't you talk about it? And I think that there is a balance between
Yes.
being too salesy and just knowing that what you're offering can help your buyer. And so it sounds like there's a lot of mindset work that goes into this too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're talking about is the person that oversells themselves. Like that's
Mhm.
all they talk about is like, are you ready to buy? Here's my offer, here's my offer, here's my offer. And so what's missing in those moments is they're not connecting the dots. So it's very like to me, very feature heavy versus benefit heavy. And you can't
Mm.
learn what the benefit is to someone if you're not talking to them.
Mm.
So it comes back to engagement, right? So like once you build a connection with someone, right, you're more open to hearing what they have to say. But if you haven't built a connection, then you're coming across as like very transactional, even when you are finally asking for the sale, right? Like you said, we all have those people that show up in our DMs and our inboxes or send us a text when they want something, but you never hear from them outside of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you recommend filling in the middle between the sales and the first introduction?
So I would say really focus on getting to know people, right? In the same way you would a friend or a family member. Get to know them, get curious, ask a lot of questions, find out who they are. If they come to you and they're talking about something, ask more clarifying questions. You can never go wrong with that. I position this as an open-ended question. So have you ever heard of an open-ended question before?
I have, yes.
Yay! So for anyone who doesn't know what it is, there's open-ended and close-ended questions. So close-ended questions typically close the conversation because they get you a yes or no response. Open-ended open the conversation because they give you a more meaningful response. So an example of a close-ended would be, is there anything I can help you find? And an open-ended would be, what brings you in today? So very
Mhm.
different answer. And so, leaning into those open-ended questions will help you connect more because you're going to learn more. And then using that when you are following up, right? And so that kind of leads into follow up, which we can certainly talk more
Yeah,
about.
let's
But
do it.
follow up oftentimes is perceived as following up to ask if someone's ready for the sale, and that's the only reason that you should follow up is because you're asking for money, right? Like a transaction. But following up quite literally means to investigate further. And so it can be so much more than that. In fact, I think I have a list of about 35 reasons right now why you could follow up with someone. So reach out if you want that list, but it can be as simple as saying happy birthday, or maybe you read an article that you found would be really interesting to someone, or maybe you just want to find out how someone's enjoying their purchase or how their first week
Mhm.
is going with you. So I think when we reach out for reasons like that aren't always for the sale, it helps you build a connection to someone better, right? Just like you would a friend or a family, you're going to reach out about things here and there. And then when you actually need something, like, it's the time, right? You can make that connection. They know who you are. They feel like you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Because people can feel that. People really, really can feel that. And I think that I know one of the things that we talked about before was you help businesses hear less of I'm just looking and
Mhm.
actually understanding them and hearing what they're actually looking for. And I think that that ties into both open-ended questions and the follow-up.
Yes. So I think we're really conditioned when we walk into a store to hear, is there anything I can help you find
Mhm.
today? And we just say, no, I'm just looking, even if there's something we're looking for. Like if you pay attention to this now when you go in and out of stores, like everyone says that, like nine
Yeah,
out of 10 times. So if we don't want that answer, then we have to change the question, right?
that's a good point.
Yeah. And so that's where it goes back to open-ended questions, right? Because we're asking a closed-ended question. Is there anything I can help you find? And so the answer is going to be yes or no. And I can promise you when you ask those type of questions, you're always going to hear no, even
Mm-hmm.
if the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
People come into your store for a reason, right? Whether it's just to browse or be inspired, or maybe they something caught their eye, or maybe they are ready to buy, but they don't know what it looks like, right? But even if they know, the answer is still no. And so the same is in the online space, right? Someone follows you, they followed you for a reason. Maybe they think you're their ideal client, right? Or maybe they really like the content you're putting out. But there's a reason people follow you, that they click follow.
Yeah. Yeah. And how would you recommend switching up that, what can I help you, or is there anything I can help you find? What are some other options that we can say?
Yeah, all the juicy details.
Yes.
So that is something that I work with a business on. We'll kind of examine what is your goal, like what style of business are they, what should they be asking. So we would work through some questions, but really thinking about what open-ended questions can you ask, and not necessarily a question that leads you straight to the sale. It can literally, like, the number one thing I can tell you to do is just acknowledge and greet people. So someone walks through the door, just lead with, "Hey, hello, welcome, how are you?" And I always recommend, don't stand behind the counter, get out from behind it, right? Go greet people where they're at. You're not going to greet your friends and family from the couch or the kitchen. You're most likely going to go to the door and go say hello to them, right?
Mhm.
And it's as simple as that. Greeting is not a pitch, it's just saying hello. So lead with that. And then what you say next comes easier. And you're going to hear less of "I'm just looking" or "no."
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And can you tell us any stories of maybe your clients who have implemented these? Because they seem like easy switches, but it does seem like it would make a big difference in the actual process. So, have you, when you're starting to work with clients and you're like, okay, just walk out from behind the counter, do you get any pushback of like, oh, that won't work? And then they try it and it does?
All of the time, absolutely.
I
I
bet.
think that we get really comfortable behind the counter,
Yeah.
right? But the counter is a barrier. And what's really important to sales is body language. And we like to think that it's not, but it is. So if you don't know what body language is, it's all of your nonverbal communication. So your posture, your stance, your eye contact, your tone of voice, right? It's everything but your words. And it makes up like 90 to 93% of your communication, which is massive. So when we're standing behind a counter, we're communicating that, like, I'm here to sell you and you're here to buy from the get-go. So it's going to be really hard to build a connection when you've already set yourself up in a very transactional, like, atmospheric
Hmm.
interaction, right? So we really want to break that. So first of all, as best as you can, don't ever stand behind a counter. If you're in the online space, your counter is your social media. So get out from behind it and have some conversations and get in your community, right? So I would say, actually, this morning I had a conversation with someone and we had talked a little bit about mindset. And a big mindset is, if you're an introvert, you can't sell because you're not like a people person, or like it's like you're not comfortable like being in front of people. But I actually find that introverts tend to be the best salespeople because they're really good at listening. And that is not to say that an extrovert can't be absolutely amazing at either. They 100% are. It's just not quite what we always perceive it to be, because sales is more one-on-one. But anyways, so we had this conversation about like following up and still getting to know people and just starting the conversation, right? And getting it going and reaching out and saying hello. And they told me this morning that they had gone back through some of their previous conversations and comments and actually like discovered there were people that were kind of like, "Hey, I'm here. Do you do this?" But they hadn't like leaned into it for whatever reason. And so they reached out and were surprised to find that these people were ready to buy. So
Mm.
I think just again, like not being afraid to just start the conversation. And I always say, if you know me, that the answer is always no unless you ask. So if you ask and it's no, it's still the same answer, right? So there's no harm in just putting yourself out there and saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about you," or, "We had this conversation previously. I just wanted to check back in with you."
I love that. The answer is always no unless you ask. That is such a good way to think about it because I do agree. Like, we can get so much anxiety about sales or fe like worried about how they're going to perceive us. And that's such great advice that, yeah, those clients that you're just talking about were so ready to buy, but they just needed you to maybe open the door. or just, you know, welcome them in. I think that that's what a lot of people now these days do want instead of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen this in the online space too of like everyone wants to have those personal connections rather than just DM me the word convert and I'll send you my 10-step whatever it is and then it's like an automatic message. I think that people can see right through that and having
Mhm.
those processes are nice for lead generation, but then what are you going to do with those leads? Hopefully nurture them deeper.
Right. Hopefully follow up,
Yeah,
right?
hopefully
You
follow
know,
up. Yes.
this sounds horrible, and I don't know, anyone can decide too how they want to go about this, but I get so bothered when I get a cold DM
Yeah.
or like a cold pitch. I'll distinguish that. So a cold pitch is when someone just you've never talked to before and they just pitch you immediately in the DMs. And I get so bothered by that because how can you tell me I want these things if you've never even asked? Like you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know where I'm at with it. Like it's even worse when they have the wrong name, right? Like you're like, I am just a number to you. And so you can just tell like they're just trying to make money as quickly as possible, which me as a consumer makes me feel like they really don't have my interest in mind. And can they actually provide the solution for me? Like I haven't had time to like think through this if I need this first of all and if they're the right answer. So
Mhm.
I like obviously it works because people do it, but I'd imagine it's very hard to convert through that. So what I tend to do, I just block people because I'm so tired of
Yeah.
it. Like if you just get to know me, like I'll probably hire you at some point, but I just, yes, it's not my favorite thing. I don't recommend it. So then a cold DM, you're probably like, what? Aren't they the same thing? To me, like a cold DM is just sending a message to someone out of the blue, right? Like maybe it's hello, right? In the same way that we would do it in person or at a networking event. Like you have to start a conversation with someone at some point, right? It's always going to be cold at some point in the process. So to me, that's what a cold DM is. A cold pitch is pitching immediately. But so, I mean, that happens in retail too, right?
Yeah.
You walk in a store and the associate goes, hey, welcome in. Everything's 30% off today, or tops are 30% off. Let me know if you need any help, right? Like, how did you know that this person wanted tops? You don't, right? Maybe they wanted
Yeah.
jewelry.
Right. Right. No, that's a great point. And you specialize in helping underperforming stores. Are there commonalities between these underperforming stores? Are they ones that do exactly that, kind of don't get to know the buyer?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And it really is just about connecting with people. It's learning how to better communicate. It's learning how to build the retention and the relationship so that people want to come back and see
Hmm.
you and that they rave about you, that they tell all their friends and family that they had such an amazing experience that they're posting on social media so that everyone knows just how good of an experience it was, right? And so we often forget the power of that or think that people will automatically do it, but it does take a little bit of effort and work. And so really I think the commonality is, so like in retail we would call it clienteling, which is like the art of like client relationships. So there is usually a lack of it.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that, especially if you have maybe a clothing store or a jewelry store. Well, maybe not then because you might get to know them a little bit more, but just stores where you're going to walk in, look around, and walk out. There's stores I've been to multiple times, and maybe the person has said hi to me, but that's as deep as the conversation has gone. And so,
Yes.
I'm like, oh, they have cute stuff, but I don't feel any personal connection to that
Right.
brand. So is that kind of
Well,
what you help them do?
like a really good example of this, I was actually at a coffee shop this morning. And so when I walked in, you would think, well, this is really straightforward. I'm just going to order. They're going to write my name on the cup. They're going to give it to me. Like they'll probably smile when I walk in. But when I walked in, this was my first time. It was a new coffee shop and they were behind the counter, which is probably a little more typical in a coffee
Mhm.
shop. So I'm not going to, judge anything there. Like I get it. Some situations are different. But they didn't really say hi to me or welcome or what can I get started for you? Or how, like, have you been here before? What do you know about us? And when I had expressed finally, like, oh, I just need a second. I'm trying to take it in. I've never been here. I want to see what your menu is. They're just like, okay, let me know when you're ready. Like, this was such a beautiful opportunity for them to be like, well, here's what we're known for. Like, what do you enjoy drinking? And then when I finally gave them my drink, I expressed that I wanted food. And this also would have been a really great opportunity for them to say, well, here's something that I think would pair really well with your food. And that just enhances the customer experience, right? And then they could be like, this is my name. What's your name? Like, I'm really excited for you to try this. Like, come back and let me know what you think of your coffee and your food when you're done. But like, none of this happened, right? They just simply took my order, they wrote it down, and then they gave it to me. And it ended there. Like, I can't even tell you the person's name. There, like, even when I left, there was no like, have a great day. Thanks so much for coming in. And like, they weren't crazy busy. Like, there was so much opportunity there. So, really, like, I guess how to answer that is another thing I find is that what happens is we get so focused on the operational side of our business that we forget about the people that are actually in our business there to spend money with us. And so what I hear a lot is like, oh, my traffic's down. How do I get my traffic up? But like, these are moments where we have the traffic in our store and we can take advantage of it and create a really memorable experience and sell them, right? And so in this circumstance, this would have been a good sales for them because I wanted them to recommend it to me, but they weren't. So I see kind of these things happening oftentimes when maybe we're missing the mark a little bit in our sales.
Yeah, that's a really, really great example. And that's also a person that definitely needs to hire you, right?
I have worked with coffee shops before, so it's
Yeah.
a fun one. It's a very
No, I'm
Seattle thing.
sure. Very, very Seattle. I mean, my brand is espresso podcast production. I love coffee. And so a good coffee shop experience definitely stands out to me. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that story. And I'm curious, turning, the focus back on your business, when you know a brand like this needs help, like how do you normally find your clients? Is it you pitching yourself to them, or is it I know you're a part of different networking groups and have a lot of connections in the city, but how do you mainly, get yourself hired, sell your own
yeah.
services?
I definitely should be better about pitching myself in those moments. So I'm not perfect either. But, if I was in that moment and I was really like, you know what, I could help these people, I might go back up afterwards and say, hey, like, I noticed this today and I just wanted to pass this along. Like, I do sales training and I thought it would be really helpful, or ask for the manager. Not being afraid to just be like, hey, this is what I do, and
Mhm.
maybe providing value, so to say, and saying, here's something that I noticed that could really make a difference, and not expecting anything from it, right? And just maybe leaving my card and introducing myself. So that would be me creating the connection versus them creating it with me. So kind of, role reversal there. Otherwise, I'm very, very involved in some local communities around here, mostly on the east side. So you'll find me at almost anything. I'm always popping up. But to me, it's such a like meaningful way to learn what's happening in the community, find out what's going on with others. And I love to support others in their endeavors. And I know that it always comes back tenfold. So it's just building connection with my community. And I think like the hard thing is it's not overnight sometimes. It does take time, but I know that it's a long-term game. And the opportunities that have come out of it, I could have only dreamed of. I never would have thought some things would have come forth. So a lot of networking, a lot of follow up, a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of just observations sometimes. I also host a lot of workshops. So oftentimes people will come and listen to me, learn from me, and then realize that they need some help. And so we'll have a conversation around that as well.
Very cool. What are the workshop topics typically?
Ooh, well, anything from how do you engage customers, like what do you say, which open-ended questions is a full-on workshop, believe it or
Oh,
not.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And I know you have to let me know when you do the next one because I think podcasts can also learn from that a lot. When you're interviewing someone, if you're asking closed-ended questions.
And then you're not getting these thoughtful responses either. Yeah, on
Yeah.
a podcast episode. Yeah. So I topics like that, how to follow up. I sometimes talk through the entire sales process. You can see how it's all connected and how important each step really is, that you can't just jump to the end, right? To ask for the sale, that there is a step by step.
Mhm.
Also upselling, cross-selling, adding on topics like that. So I do typically host a workshop each month, kind of all over. So it does change. And I try to post about it on social media and make sure it's on my website so anyone can follow, and also in my newsletters.
Perfect. Well, for all the listeners, those links will be in the show notes if you want to learn some sales tips from Rachel. But before we get into your action steps for the week, I wanted to ask you if you have any sales tips that you wanted to share on this podcast that the listeners can learn from, or anything else you wanted to share before we start to wrap up?
Yeah. So I would say don't be afraid to follow up. There is a reason that it says fortune is in the follow up because sometimes that follow up is what really builds the relationship for you. So the follow up isn't always just a pitch, but maybe you made the initial connection and now you're focused on following up to get to know them better, right? Through a one on one, through supporting them, through maybe they're doing something that you just want to help with, right? So don't be afraid to follow up with people. And I would also say it's okay to hear no. Not everyone is going to be the perfect customer, and they may not be your customer now, but doesn't mean they won't be in a year or 5 years. Gosh, I've had people come back to me many years later that I never thought I would see again, but I just stayed consistent. So I guess I would say that's my third one is like
Mm.
always roll out the red carpet for everyone, regardless of the situation. So if you're in a retail store and they make a return, you shouldn't change how you treat them just because they're returning, right? This is still an opportunity to sell and turn it around. Or just because someone's unhappy, really roll out the extra red carpet, right? Make sure that they feel so taken care of if they're upset. And how can you make it right? It's,
Yeah.
we oftentimes will roll out the red carpet when we think someone's going to buy and then change it when we realize that they're not. So stay consistent, treat everyone the same, go above and beyond, and make sure to follow up.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I recently had a sales call and I talked to the client like 5 times before they even converted. I was on their podcast, they were on my podcast. We talked a lot. We had quite a few follow-up calls. Then she was like, "Hey, I want to work with you." And I was like, "Okay." Was dead for a while. Just did not hear anything from her. But I still was just responding to her stories as I would normally would. And eventually it became my biggest sale to date just because I was consistent with it. And that is such a good analogy of don't like roll back up that red carpet and be like, all right, I'm taking this with me. Don't waste my time anymore.
Yeah,
I mean, we all are humans and we all live these lives. And I think we need to give each other more grace, but that is a different story for another day. Just I've gotten some messages where I'm like, I am ready to buy, just give me a minute. And it kind of gives me that like vibe if, I start to feel them like pull that back of it's now or never. Those like quick buy tactics they're not going to work on me. And I know they aren't going to work on a lot of people.
urgency is a closing tactic,
Mhm.
absolutely. Creating some FOMO. With that said, I do believe you should only use it when it's legitimate urgency. Like the
Exactly.
sale
Yeah.
is ending. If you are
Mhm.
interested, you have till then. But creating it as a false sentence, I think is not a good look and it will really damage reputation if people
Yeah.
find out. So
Yeah.
it's not worth it, right? It might be worth it short term. It's just not worth it long term.
For sure, for sure. And just going back to what you said before with the follow-up, if any of the listeners want that list of all those follow-up reasons, I just want to remind them all to go and message you and, get that list because I feel like that's helpful, right? That's helpful to have, you know, a list of reasons to follow up rather than, hey, just wanted to follow up.
Right.
Just something a little cuter, like punchier.
Right. And it can be awkward. Like, what do I say? How do I say it in a way that doesn't feel transactional? Right. And
Hmm.
so, again, I promise you that if you connect with someone, follow up will be significantly easier because you're going to know what to say. Right. Like Haley, you and I, we met at a networking dinner, right?
Hmm.
Event. And we talked about your podcast. We talked about you moving here. We talked about what brought us to that networking event. We talked about like we had dinner. Like there's so much that happened
Yeah.
that night, right? So next time I reach out to you, I can be like, oh, Haley, do you remember what we ate? Or like, what was your favorite part about that night? Like I now have something to talk about because we connected over something, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if I just simply exchanged information with you, like my name, like I have nothing to say to you. And so then I'm going to be like, what do I say? Do I say, hey, I'm just following up, right? Like, so really ask yourself if you're in those moments and you don't know what to say, it's probably because you didn't connect enough. But
Hmm.
there's still opportunity to turn it around, right?
For sure.
Like by saying, hey, I really enjoyed meeting the other night. I'm sorry we didn't get to connect more. I would love to learn more about you. How about we grab some coffee, right? Like
Yeah.
you can turn that around really quickly. And so, and like even like I saw your face and you're like, whoa, she did remember things. Like, so it does go a long way when we take the time to listen and be curious and to learn and to connect. It really just stands out.
It does. It really does. I love that. And Rachel, to wrap up this episode and how I wrap up every podcast episode of mine, I love to ask the guest to share 3 action steps for the audience to take this week so they can actually take action off of what we're talking about. So, what are your 3 action steps that you want to challenge the audience with this week?
So I would say, first of all, follow up. So I
Hmm.
want you to start with 5 people. Write down 5 names of someone that you maybe haven't spoken to in a month or a week or two. And I want you just to like come up with the reason why you could be reaching out to them. Like, what is the reason? Is it because they had a birthday? Is it because you haven't heard from them in a while and you just want to be like, I'm thinking of you? Or maybe you mailed them something. You want to make sure that their package arrived, right? Like, just think of something that you could do to reach out to them specifically. And I would encourage you not to do someone that you saw just yesterday. Think about someone you haven't heard from in a while. And you never know who's going to be like, oh, I've been thinking about you. I've been meaning to reach out, right? Simply
Yeah.
because you didn't pitch. So, and then I would do that. I would I'm gonna like, okay, here's like a little add-on one. So this is maybe a little bit different than our conversation, but also a follow-up one. So I would go back through your last transactions that you've had in last week and pull 5 people. And I want you to look at what they purchased and think about what else they would need in order to be successful with that purchase. Okay. So we
Mhm.
often think about like, so here's an example, like in jewelry, like I could just sell jewelry, but oftentimes fine jewelry tarnishes, right? It's what makes it higher quality, but it also just reacts. And so, what do you need when something tarnishes? You need to know how to care for it and clean for it. So, if I hadn't had that conversation with someone, they could have left so happy, but then been really upset later on, which now influences their entire perception of the interaction, right? So, think about those little things that you might have that could make them more successful in their purchase that maybe they didn't buy that day. So go back through some transactions, think about what else they could use, and then go follow up with them and be like, hey, I just wanted to touch base with you, see how you're enjoying your purchase. I also want to make sure you knew about this because this might come up, right? And maybe be a little more clever than those words. Those are just quick words I'm giving you. But so do that. And then number 3, I would say think about your open-ended questions. So really think about what you want people to answer when they walk in the door and what you need to ask in order to get there. It's going to be hard. It sounds really easy, but it's not like rocket science, but it does take a little bit of effort to really think about what you want to be asking.
I love those. Those are great. And so I moved to Alki Beach and there was just a art festival down here. And what I noticed was, there are a lot of small shops that really rely on sales and business, especially locally. And I was thinking when you were talking right now of what a lot of them did was just hand me a business card or don't really give me a reason to come back or even remember who they are. And their business cards are, there's only so much you can put on a business card, right? So when we meet someone in person or when we have a customer maybe come to us and buy from us once, how do we really build that lifetime fan, right? Is there anything better than just giving a business card?
I mean, I think that goes back to our conversation about connection and
Hmm.
following up, right? So if we built a connection, I think it's expected that someone will hear from you again. And when they don't, I think it kind of makes them feel subconsciously like, that was very transactional. They were only
Yeah.
nice to me for the sake of the sale, right? So I do think it's really important when there's an exchange of information, like do something with it. Or if they follow you on social media, like acknowledge them at that point. What a great way to stay connected, right? I can't tell you how many times I go shopping, and if I had a great experience, I'm going to look them up on social media and follow them. I am not going to follow someone that I had a bad experience with. So remember that, right? I enjoyed it so much that I want to be in your sphere and stay connected to it. So acknowledge that, keep it going, touch base with them. You know, I think another good like business card analogy here is like when we go networking, and there's always that person in the room that's like goal is to meet every single person in the room. And the way that they're doing it is they're like, hi, I'm so and so. What's your name? Okay, well, here's what I do. Here's my card. Let me know if you ever need any help. And it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know you. Like,
Right.
people toss that straight into the bin. It's like a waste of your energy, right? But if you slow down and you focus on meeting a few people that day and kind of connecting with them, asking some deeper questions, they're going to walk away from that and remember you. Remember what you looked like, remember your name, remember where you worked, right? And it just shows like investment in people. And I
Hmm.
think that's what we all want is if we're going to spend our money, we want to know it's going to the right place. And so when someone's quick and transactional, it just feels like they're like on to the next, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not a detailed, they're not invested in what they're doing with you because they're so focused on that next sale. And I
Hmm.
promise you, like these people don't recognize that, right? Like it feels like I'm being really engaging, I'm talking to a lot of people, right? And so it's a mindset thing. And then like again, going back to coaching, without it, like you're not getting feedback, right? And if no one's giving you feedback or helping you guide you, tell you these things, you wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, that's great because I was thinking like they're giving me their business card and then it's up to me to go follow them on social media when maybe I didn't have a conversation with them. Maybe they just handed it to me. Their business card is going to go somewhere. I don't know where it's going to go, but
Yeah.
it's like that personal connection definitely can make the difference and leave it less on the buyer to make the next first step. Maybe the first step was them walking into your booth or walking into your store, but then the follow-up can be your next step
Right.
if you
Well,
make that
and what
connection.
happens in those situations, right? Like maybe you exchange business cards. Maybe they got yours. Maybe they didn't, right? They just gave you theirs. So are they ever going to follow up with you? No, it's on you to follow up with them. So they're going to be in this place of waiting for the next sale. So it's the
Hmm.
same thing in retail when you open your store for the day and you wait for people to come in. Pick up the phone, call people, go build connection, give them a reason to come back and see you, right? I like so you asked me this earlier. Do I still work in sales? I don't. But there was 1 year after I left, they called me and they said, "Hey, Rachel, will you come back for the holiday season? We just need some help." And I said, "Well, like I'm kind of busy. I've got some clients, but I have a day here or there. Would that be okay?" And they said, "Fine, whatever. We'll work with you." Great. So what's the first thing I did? I'd been gone for 2 years, and this is so bad, so don't judge me. But there was a group of people I really had not spoken to in 2 years. So the first thing I did is I reached out to them and I said,
Hmm.
"Hey, I'm going to be in the store. I would love to see you. I know it's been a while. Catch up with you, hear how you're doing, and help you with your holiday shopping. Come see me." And all of them did. Every single one of them. And one person bought like 62 items. And I hadn't seen this person in 2 years.
Wow.
So, like, I made this and, like, I remember the team was looking at me like, "How did you do that?" And, like, I wasn't the store manager anymore, right? I was just there as, like, an employee, and they're like, "How did you do that?" I'm like, "Clienteling," right? Like, I followed up, I kept in contact, I built these connections. And then, that lady that came back that bought all those items, we've stayed connected since, and we've gone, for lunch and happy hour, and we've, deepened it since then, which is wild. Do you think I would have before?
Mhm.
But so there really is like a lot of power in following up
Yeah.
with people and staying connected and not forgetting about them and then giving them that reason to want to come back and sometimes taking the initiative and providing it and telling them straight up, be very blunt, right? I know we get afraid of like being forceful, but like I did it in a tactful way of like, I want to see you. I want to catch up. I want to hear what's going on. I want to help you with your holiday shopping, right?
Yeah.
So
I love that. You made her feel special and like you wanted her there. And I love that. That's such a great story, and congrats on that sale.
yeah.
I can only
Thank you.
imagine everyone else like, what? And so that's a
Well,
really,
I've done
really
it a
great
few
story.
times. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's awesome.
it's connecting. And then the reason I sold that many was because I knew her. I asked a lot of questions. I connected. We kept engaging throughout the conversation. I was learning things. And then as I presented product, I connected it to what she was telling me. Like, "Oh, you need this item because you told me this," right? We just kept going, right?
Mhm.
Like I didn't stop the sale by saying, "Is there anything else you want to see?" But anyways, that's a whole different conversation. So
Yeah, no,
it's
I
all
love
about
that.
connection. It's all about connection.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I've learned a lot from you, and you've shared a lot of great stories and action steps for the audience to take. So, if they want to connect with you, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so I do tend to be very active on social, specifically Instagram, but I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can find me Rachel Morgan Coaching, which will be in the show notes.
Hmm.
And then I also have a monthly newsletter. So the topic changes every month. And I usually provide a sales tips, some articles, recommendations like podcasts, books, reading material, blog posts, things like that. So it's really just a good tool and resource for you.
Very cool. Yes, those will be in the show notes. And just really thank you for being so open and sharing your story today. I've really learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.